Today I'm going to apply a rust protection process called cold bluing onto a stop that I've built for my milling machine vise. Now, whether this rust protection is going to work well or not, that is a question for future. But I live close to the sea, would be less than a quarter mile away. We have cold nights here, sea breeze, all the rest of it, and things get surface rust quickly. Now, this is a relatively new milling machine, and all the components, I'd like it not to become rusty. I'm coating the milling machine of a night with an oil, but how successful it's going to be, you can even see whereas I've missed a little bit on the side of the vise, already starting to turn. So I just thought, as this is like a wear, sort of a, I don't know, but just, it's not even a cast, it's really just a normal mild steel, that it will probably go rusty pretty quick. So basically it attaches to the back here through those bolts, and you can adjust the little slide, the couple slides and that to work for whatever job you're doing. So I'm going to pull this apart, clean it up with probably acetone. I'll just skip trying it with metho or denatured alcohol. Just go to the big boy and get it done. We'll start the process. So let's pull this apart first. Okay, so I'm going to work on one thing at a time. I'll get the screws out of here, because everything's supposed to be really clean. So I'm sure that there would be more oils, etc., leaching out around the bolts to probably affect the finish. So I'll get them out of the way. So which one will I go with first? Let's start with something small, and we'll go with this little fella here. Now this was made out of a bolt, so it's still got the partial threads there. It's not a design feature, it's just how it ended up. I didn't have enough something stock small enough to make this part without turning down something way bigger. A clean rag. I'm using here acetone. I think if you want something clean, just use acetone. Be done with it. Okay. Fumes of the acetone though is pretty damn strong. Can take your breath away if you take a good whiff. Right, we'll just pick the edge of this one up just to make sure we get the acetone off, which should evaporate pretty quick anyway. Let's put the lid back on, avoid disasters. Right, so container I'm using, the only one I could really find was old milk container, washed out and everything, and I've just cut it in half, sort of horizontally, just to give me a little working spot here. Like before, using this stuff here, seemed to work alright on the other component that I made for the lounge chair that had to be repaired. Just want to use a little bit at a time, so I'll pour a smidge in here, put that out of the way, put the lid back on. Now you don't want to cross-contaminate by either tipping used liquid back into the container or by dipping your brush or whatever you're using to apply it in and out of the container. Apparently it causes a reaction and basically destroys its usefulness reasonably quickly. So that's why I'm just get a little bit out of the time as you need it. And that's how I did it last time. So I just use a brush. And when you first apply it, it does go all sort of splotchy. But what I've learned is once you've sort of done a bit of an area, you can see where it's worse or not. Just now, it's almost like you're painting the finish on. I might just zoom that in a bit and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So you can see on this flat here, it's splotchy. We'll start down at the bottom. And now as we go, just refreshing. And I'd say it had something to do with the chemical that works on the surface quickly being used up in the reaction process. So if you keep refreshing it, like rubbing it more, fresher liquid back on, it works quite well. So just keep it, so it's literally almost like painting the finish onto it. It's not exactly a fast process, but that's looking pretty good already. So now I've done half of it. What I'll do is I'll go and rinse off this half, because it's been well and truly over a minute. They say to you do it for about a minute. Rinse off this half in water, dry it, and we'll spin it around and we'll start working on the other end to meet back in the middle. So that's what I've achieved so far. Half of it, with this is the first application. Whether this even works in what I'm trying to use it for, sliding motion between metal parts, will that just rub that off? It'll be pretty easily, and I'll be back to sort of exposed material for rusting. Not sure. It's now going to work on the bottom end and meet it back into the middle. Just sort of throw it around all over it to start with. Now, because I've got those leftover bits of thread, it's going to be a bit more finicky. So now I'm going to start just painting it over and over, get the finish. So this isn't for aesthetics, this is basically, I say, trying to bring in some sort of rust protection. Whether it works in time, only time will tell. So there's a little bit there, is a bit more stubborn. It's coming in now. Working that in that groove. Okay, so for the first application, I think that's quite good. Now it's more of a black colour than a blue. Yeah. So, okay, with one application, we can see the change definitely in colour. This is the piece we've done. This is just mild steel, bright mild steel. It's been machined. So the decision has to be made, is that enough? Do I do it a second time? Let's do it a second time. So the instructions say to brighten it a little bit with steel wool in between passes, or in between applications. Assuming that is to try and get the finish uniform. So if there's any darker parts, it does say lightly, so if you apply it too hard, I'm assuming you just take all the finish off. But we'll just go ahead and do what they say, and I suppose you can't be complaining about results if you don't follow the instructions. So far I'm not complaining at all, but just a note. Okay, so I'd say I've brightened that somewhat. Didn't really take much. Okay, so I'll reapply. Probably don't need to see this all over again, so I will come back when this one's finished. Okay, so once the part's been done, I've seen it mentioned online that soaking the part in oil overnight helps the, I suppose, look, the surface does feel a little bit more flat, not as shiny as it was before. And I think the theory is that the oil penetrates into the surface to give it some rust protection. The instructions on the actual cold blue that I'm using does mention their own product. I don't have that product, whether it is just a glorified oil or something special. That could be the case, or it could not. So I suppose only time will tell whether this does give me some rust protection. If it fails, then maybe I'll search out the proper process and try that and see if that works. But this seems to be the done thing. So now I'll move on to the next item. Might as well do this bar here. just start cleaning it up. Right, back again. So, onto the second one. I've cleaned it. I've used acetone. Now, it'd be interesting to see whether this small amount of chemical they put in here, it's very small, like, geez, I'd be lucky to be a teaspoonful. It's already worked on the other piece. Wonder whether it is as efficient as it was or whether it's now losing steam. So we'll start applying and yeah, see how it goes. So once again, I'm just going to apply it on all surfaces to about halfway. I mean, there is this discoloured the liquid in the bottom slightly black. I've got a feeling that it is the case that it's just done all the reactions it can in that small amount. Yeah, so this isn't turning as black anywhere as quickly. I know it's a bigger area, but I'd say that the acids in this are just about kaput. We're getting something, but it certainly isn't like it was. Okay, so I didn't quite get to halfway. I thought I would put some new cold blue solution in there, and that's way more than I did last time, so that should last me quite a while. Okay, so let's see if that made any difference. I will say it hasn't made a massive difference, so that's interesting. What I'm probably doing is trying to get the whole process in one go by rubbing it in continually. If they said you could leave it in there for a minute or so. I've been working on this probably for 5 minutes. So I'm probably supposed to repeat this process more times than I am. But I'm getting the finish that I'm looking for, so. Right, rinsed it off, turned it around, dried it, and we'll just finish off this last little bit here. I'm not going to bother trying to get inside the hole there, because in theory, when that's screwed together, which it always will be, there's no really oxygen in there, so it shouldn't rust wherever that is left on the shaft at any point anyway. So I'm not going to bother. It'll probably go in, some will go in there, but I'm not going to be looking for that surface finish that I'm looking for on everything else. And I think I've decided that I'm not going to repeat this twice, that I could repeat it as I did with the first part. So this could be a little experiment within experiment. I like the finish on this as it is. So rather than go to the extra time, possibly effort of making no difference, because I do think I'm doing this a little bit different to the instructions. I know I said read the instructions, and don't complain if you don't and you get a different result, but this is really quite nice and dark the way I'm doing it, so I might just run with it, and it can be like a mini experiment. I know I've done one piece twice, and if I do the other pieces once and that one piece is really good over time and the other pieces fail, then I'll know really need to be done more than once, but the finish is really no darker or less dark than it was when I did it twice. So if the colour is any indication, then I think this will be alright. Once again, no point in concentrating inside that. There's going to be a thread in there, a bolt in there. So that looks pretty good to me. I'll go and rinse this off again, and then we'll start working on another part. Put this in the oil and we'll start working on another part of this vice stop. Just quickly, this is the rinsed and dried result there. So look, I'm really happy with that. We'll throw that in the oil and we'll start on one of the other bits. I might start on the biggest one next. It's going to take some doing. That's this guy here. So you can tell the difference. Non-blue and blued. The reason I'm going to do this one next is this guy here with the holes and the threads in it. When cleaning, I can only clean it as best I can, but it may introduce some oils and that into the mixture, and I might lose value out of it, so I might as well get that value in this piece here first. Right, here we go again. This is something that you have to be patient with. Ordinarily, I do not have this patience. So they're literally painting on slowly the finish that I'm looking for. As the reaction takes place, slowly turning dark. Okay, I'll come back when I'm proceeded a fair bit more. Okay, so I've been at this for a while. This is half of the main section done. You do have to refresh the liquid. So it has a certain amount of potency and then basically stopping to work. So I think that's not a bad plan that I have of just adding little bits when it needs refreshing, empty out the old. I don't rinse out the container with water or anything, just in case the water helps to stop the reaction, which is more or less what it would do. I sort of flick out as much as I can out of the brush. But yeah, I'm actually really happy with that, and that's just one application, although be it a slow application. So I'll now work on this end here. Also, acetone works really well at cleaning oils and stuff off this, as I thought it would. Yeah, I haven't had any issues with certain pieces that won't go dark or anything, so the acetone works wonders. Pretty potent though, but yeah, I've ditched the glove. It was a size too small for my hand anyway, and it was annoying the hell out of me, so glove is gone. So I'm just going to work on this section here and come back when she's all done. Okay, so just about got it complete. Refreshed the liquid a little bit, about 3 or 4 times, but I only added, it would have been a tablespoon if lucky, to the container. Threw the old stuff out, and then put some more in and went along. I could have dived the whole, or thrown the whole lot in the container and done this way quicker, I am quite positive. But then I wouldn't have any more cold blue left to do any other projects. And of course I do have another piece to go, so yeah, sort of it's going quite nicely. While I'm sitting here, I've got the other containers sitting in the oil. And this oil I have here, I've realised that I've been using transmission oil. And transmission oil has a certain smell to it. And I don't know whether that makes me crazy, but I do like the smell of transmission oil. Sometimes they say smells take you back to different times, bring up memories, and the only thing I can think of is that it possibly takes me back to when I was a young lad of about 10 years old, not working of course, living on a farm, helping cut up some wood with a PTO driven saw, and basically was told, here you go boy, here's the keys, drive it back to the house. I had to figure it out for myself. And they were the days. You wouldn't be allowed to do that now. Figured it out, and from then on, every now and then, I went and ploughed the fields, and I absolutely loved it. Now that'd be child labour, but I loved it, and maybe these smells come back from the grease. So some greases give that sort of smell off too. You had to grease the machine before you used it, and yeah. Anyway, that's just a bit of an aside. On to the last item. The square intersectional piece, I suppose, ties all the pieces together. Had to go back to the gloves, the glover, because I couldn't see myself being able to dodge the chemical, the acids, enough to not have it. So just give this a bit of a throw down with some more of the cold blue. Now I'm not expecting too much to be happening here, because this little amount of cold blue I've got in here has already done a fair bit of work on this guy here. Really happy with how that's turned out so far. Well, that's as much as I'm going to do. I'm just going to leave it in oil for 12 hours a day, whatever. And we'll just see if there is any appreciable rust protection. This used fluid is still working somewhat. As I described before, I'm not going to bother trying to coat the inside of those bores, because they're always going to be held tight around the shaft, so they really probably don't need too much rust protection. If you pull something apart that's all rusty, it's usually the piece in between where it's bolted up. It's the only bit that didn't rust. Okay, so finish the last piece. As I said, I didn't bother to glue down in there. Throw it all in oil and see how it fares in time. Here are the finished items that I have cold blued. Left them overnight and a bit longer in oil. Now they weren't soaking in oil because I didn't have a container big enough to drown them, but I was just, over time where I could, I come out and brushed oil over the top of them. Really quite happy with the way they turned out. Yeah, now just to assemble it and put it on the milling machine. Okay, so there's the vice stop installed at a random point. Interesting to see how well and if I get any rust protection at all. But anyway, looks good. Till next time.